What's up, ladies and gentlemen? It is Friday. You know what that means. Solo show. Psycho solo show here with Andrew Cooper. What's happening? Today, we're covering a very important topic to me, and that would be Yin and Yang Tight End. It's our flagship strategy. We've used it multiple years in a row, probably about 5 years in a row now, to find breakout tight ends. And let me tell you, they're out there. Some of these other positions, you don't always have like a Puka Nakua or a CJ Stroud that just comes from way down in the rankings. With tight end, for 7 straight years now, 7 straight years, we've had a tight end come from outside the top 17 in ADP to finish top 5. Last year was Sam Laporta. Twice now it's been Evan Engram, uh, you know, Mark Andrews, Darren Waller. We find these guys, right? And the way we do it is using this strategy Yin and Yang tight end. And a lot of people have asked me, like, what is it? I've got articles on it, but I figured today would be a great day to go through and look at last year and talk about the strategy and talk about how we use it and how it evolves as the season goes on and how you can use it this year to win, right? So, real quick, I'm going to pull up a bunch of the rankings from last year, put them on the screen so you can see what's going on. But real quick, the yin and yang tight end strategy, what it is if you don't get an elite tight end in fantasy football, you should not settle for a back end tight end one, right? I know there's a lot of these contests where people try and rank, players, and if you rank a guy 11 and he comes in 11th, you get a bunch of points and it makes you look good. But that doesn't really help anybody win fantasy football leagues, right? Having the tight end 11 just means that you have one of the worst tight ends in fantasy football. You have one of the worst tight ends in your league. If it's a 10 or 12 team league, tight end 11 means that you need a new tight end, right? That's what we do. So what we do is we don't draft one of those mediocre guys, or if we do, we pair him with an upside. That's the yin and yang part. The yin tight end is we wait and we take a safe player that we can start early in the season where we're not going to bleed a bunch of losses. And the yang tight end is an upside play that we put on the bench, and we don't care about floor whatsoever with that player. That's the strategy, right? The thing is, we've tried going yang and only picking the upside tight ends. Sometimes it works if you hit right away, but the problem is you still got to make the playoffs. So if you lose 2, 3, 4 weeks to start your season, and then variance comes along as it always does in fantasy football, you could end up in big trouble, right? That's why we usually go with a safe guy and an upside guy. You can do either, right? So let me pull up last year's. And again, the key part of this and why and Fantasy Alarm members know it. Ann Dunn knows it because she's hanging out with us. The people hanging out with the chat, thank you guys for popping in. This strategy does not end with the draft. It actually only begins with the draft. You look at zero RB, for instance. Most people that do zero RB realize that you're not going to hit on the breakout running back the first time every time. You know what I mean? You might, but for the most part, the whole idea is we're going to be scouring waivers to find that guy earlier. If someone gets hurt, we're going to pick them up right away. That's how zero RB works. That's how you actually win with that strategy. If you go zero RB and you're not active trading or on the waivers or anything, you're going to lose, right? And the same thing goes for tight end. If you don't get an elite tight end, you need to use a bench spot to find yourself some upside, right? There's nothing drives me crazier than the people, repeating something they heard back in 2005 where they say, "Oh, you can only ever draft one QB or tight end. Why would you ever take a second tight end? It makes no sense." Like, and then I see these people using best ball brain strategies where they start their draft with 7 straight wide receivers, then they take 4 running backs, and then they take 1 tight end, right? If you start your draft with 7 tight ends, you don't need another 7 on your bench. It's okay to use 1 bench spot on tight end. Okay. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to go through last year and break them out. So here's what I do in the rankings. We have one section at the top that we call the standalone tier. If you get one of those guys, all you're worrying about is your bye week. After that, we break them into yin and yang, safety versus upside. And then at the bottom, we typically rank whoever's left over for the really deep leagues. So going into week 1, the start of the season last year, here's what our top rankings look like. And again, they're not always going to be right, but we're always adjusting them where we're trying to figure it out. And if you want this year's yin and yang tight end rankings, they are in the draft guide right now. You can go over there and get them, scan the QR code on the screen or go to fantasyalarm.com and check that out. Get those rankings, and they're already in there. They're set for this year. And there's a write up in there that covers the standalone guys, the strategy, the fades that we're not picking, the upside guys, and that combined is over 20,000 words. It's like reading, but it's more, it's entertaining. There's gifts in there. There's all sorts of cool stuff, but it's like reading, Animal Farm by George Orwell. That's how many words are in this puppy. We put a lot of work into this because we want to be the best in the industry, and we have been for a while now. So last year, this is what we were doing going in. Darren Waller, of course, got hurt, so we liked the upside at his value, but he got hurt, didn't really help us out there. But these were the standalone guys, and we weren't really drafting Dallas Goedert or George Kittle just because we didn't really love their upside. Essentially, with the color code to start the season, greener guys we really like the ADP, yellower guys we're taking at ADP, red are guys we're not taking, right? And then this was the next tier, the yin and yang tier, right? And when you look at this one, you can see Evan Engram, very safe play, the safest possible play we felt that you could start, and turned out that you could start them all year long, especially in PPR. And then on the other side, we have the Yang play. So on the Yin side, it's like Evan Engram, Pat Fryermuth, he got banged up and was kind of boring in general. Greg Dulcich also got hurt. But like these guys on the left are typically not top two targets on the team. That's the number one indicator for upside. We want guys that are top two targets on the team. We want guys that don't block on pass plays. Since I've been doing this, there's essentially been three guys that have blocked on more than 15% of their pass plays and finished top five. That's over like 20 years. We're talking George Kittle 1 year, Gronk in a year that he got hurt but scored 10 touchdowns, and then Julius Thomas the year that Peyton Manning threw 55 touchdown passes. Right. So that's what we're looking for upside. And you go through, here's how we had it ranked. We had, Kincaid was our top guy. David Njoku we liked. He also obviously was a tight end one. Schultz had, we didn't know that. People forget that like Tank Dell was on the complete back burner. We knew that Nico Collins was probably going to be the top guy. We didn't know if it was John Mechie or Tank Dell or whoever. So Dalton Schultz started out with that upside. There's Sam Laporta, Chiga Conquo, who obviously once DeAndre Hopkins showed up, things got a little more ugly for him. But those are some of the plays we were making, right? So in a lot of cases, what we did is we waited and we took Evan Engram and then we took Dalton Kincaid, or we took Evan Engram and Sam Laporta, but Evan Engram had the same bye week as Laporta, so it wasn't as appealing at the time. Obviously, taking Laporta ended up being the way to rock and roll, right? So this is how we had kind of had it set up at the start of last year, and then as we go through, especially week one, that's when the biggest updates are made every single year. Every single year, week one, we go in and we make some big changes. Guys get moved around. So week one last year, right after week one happened, here's what we were looking at. Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, Darren Waller were all banged up. So all those guys were immediately listed in orange. TJ Hawkinson was looking awesome, so he gets moved up. George Kittle, Dallas Goedert, they're fine. So we left them the way they is. We get rid of the color coding once the league starts because you don't have to worry about ADP. The green and the yellow and the red, that's only based on ADP, whether we think they're a good value or not, right? So this is after 1 week of football. We're making moves, right? Evan Engram stays at the top. Zach Ertz, he's coming out. He's getting like 6, 7 targets a game. He played like 7 games and got 40 something targets in those games. So he became a fairly safe but boring play. We moved him up to Yin Yang. Boom, right away. Pat Fryermuth gets banged up. He obviously goes orange here. David Njoku, who we thought could be a top 2 target on the team, was kind of looking like he was going to be the third target, or at least him and Elijah Moore were getting very similar targets. Amari Cooper was obviously leading. So Njoku actually goes from the Yang column to the Yin column. And that's what he was for most of the year. A very safe play that had maybe some weekly upside, but didn't have crazy upside, right? Kyle Pitts stayed at the top of the Yang for us because he obviously had upside. It didn't really pan out. He did get 90 targets, which is the floor we're looking for, but his knee didn't look right. Desmond Ritter didn't look good, but still we had hope. It was 1 week in the season. The big move, of course, Sam Laporta gets moved way up. Dalton Kincaid still towards the top because we love his upside. Luke Musgrave gets added, right? These guys start getting moved around. Dalton Schultz gets moved down a little bit. We're starting to wonder if he's going to be that guy, right? And on the left, you see Hunter Henry coming up. You see some of these guys coming around. And that's what we do in week one. And it's so important to stick with the strategy, right? Because let's say you went out and you took Evan Engram and David Njoku as your 2 tight ends, right? Because of the way it shook out early in the season, we didn't feel that David Njoku had that like difference making huge upside that guys like Laporta and some of these guys had. So he gets moved to that column, right? And then you realize to yourself, okay, right? Do I need to have two of these safer guys, or should I be swapping one out for some upside, right? Or if you had Njoku, say you went like Fryermuth, say you went like Cole Kmet and Njoku. Now you say, okay, my Yang tight end Njoku, I'm going to start him. Njoku's looking startable. Then I'm going to use another bench spot, right? That's why we're moving guys around. We're trying to get this figured out, right? So, a couple weeks into the season now, uh, we we get an injury to Zach Ertz, right? That was one of the biggest. Uh, well, first off, we're talking week 7 here, so let's look at the standalone tier first. Week 7, as you can see, by the time we get into the season this far, Sam Laporta, we're starting him rest of the year. We're only worrying about him for bye weeks, so that's where we were at this stage. He gets bumped right. He's out of that Yin and Yang group, and he's up there in we're listing him top 5. And at the time, Travis Kelsey. If you go back and look at last year, and you take out the game in which Mark Andrews only played 11 snaps, if you go back and look at these guys, Travis Kelsey, Mark Andrews, TJ Hawkinson, they average 14.6 PPR points per game. That's more points per game than Sam Laporta. So that's why, even at this stage, we were still looking at Kelsey, Andrews, and Hawkinson as the top guys because they were scoring the most fantasy points per game. Sam Laporta ended up being the tight end one, but of course, there was a lot of 10 touchdowns certainly helped with that. But that's where we were halfway through the season. And to move a rookie tight end into our standalone tier, it obviously takes a lot. And, we were some of the people that believed in it. We had written the article about what it takes to be a breakout rookie tight end. And you essentially need to be the best pass catching tight end on the team. And you need to be a top 2 target on the team. Maybe I can do it like this. Yeah, there we go. Now we can, now I'm not just like a little dot on the screen. So that's what you need. You needed to be a top 2 target on the team, and you need to be the best pass catching tight end on the team, and you needed to be a top 2 target on the team. That's hard for a rookie tight end. You look at a guy like Cole Kmet. When he came out, he was the best tight end on the team right away in his rookie year, but they had Jimmy Graham. And because Jimmy Graham doesn't block and they want to use everybody a little bit, Jimmy Graham got to play those wide receiver snaps, run the wide receiver routes. That held Cole Kmet down. That little bit when you're a rookie can throw things off, right? Same for let's see, Evan Engram, when he first came out, he was the third fiddle on the team, really, behind Odell Beckham Jr. and Saquon Barkley and kind of Sterling Shepard. But when Odell Beckham Jr. got hurt, now he had the upside to be a top 5 tight end, right? And then when he got to a team like the Jaguars that actually used him that way, now he's obviously been awesome for the last 2 years, right? So a lot of these younger guys, they get stuck to some degree, right? Michael Mayer stuck behind rotating with Austin Hooper, and also they got Devontae Adams getting 180 targets and Jacoby Myers getting over 100. He didn't really stand a chance there. But Sam Laporta and Dalton Kincaid immediately were top 2 targets on the team among everybody, better than the wide receivers, better than everybody else. So that's how they can make that breakout, right? So we moved him up. He's in there. Once, oh yeah, we're not gonna be able to do it this way. All right. Once Zach Ertz went down, we immediately recognized the upside of Trey McBride. Now we still like the upside of Kyle Pitts and Dalton Kincaid, but we were telling everybody, go add this guy. Go add Trey McBride. You're going to want to have this guy. And also on the left, you'll notice George Kittle came down briefly. He technically finished as a top 5 tight end, but he did it mostly because of injuries to Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. In the games where everybody was healthy, he only had 3 games with more than 3 catches when everybody was healthy. They played, including the playoffs, they played 19 games. In 12 games of 19, he had 3 or fewer catches, right? But he had these big spike weeks when Deebo Samuel was out, when Juwan Jennings was out, when Brandon Ayuk was out, and he did make it there. But at this stage, he just had a couple games where he only had 1 catch. So we didn't quite trust him as much. He comes down in that category. Obviously, Njoku, very trustworthy. Jake Ferguson is a guy not super high upside, but trustworthy. And Jake Ferguson, people always ask me, they're like, oh, well, he can be a top 2 target on the team. Why doesn't he have the upside? Why wouldn't he be a Yang tight end? The thing with Jake Ferguson is, yes, he can be a top 2 target on the team. He was second in targets last year behind only CeeDee Lamb. The problem with him is he doesn't have the athleticism, right? He doesn't have the athleticism to go out and have these monster seasons. Last year, he had more targets and more receptions than George Kittle, but he only had 760 yards because Jake Ferguson runs a 4.8 and George Kittle runs a 4.52. I pulled up every play where a tight end had 40 plus yards over the last 7 years, and there wasn't a single tight end that ran a 4.8 or slower that had more than one of those plays over the 7 year span. Not in a single season, over the entire span, right? These guys just aren't ripping off big plays. So Jake Ferguson is fine, right? He needs a lot of targets and he should get a good number of targets and that should give him a nice floor, but the ceiling's not super high, right? So for those joining us, we're looking at week 7 from last year. If you want the rankings this year, go over to fantasyalarm.com/win. Get yourself a copy of the draft guide, or if you want to sign up for the full year for a full membership, you or even just use 1 month, use promo code Let's Go. You can get 50% off the first month, or you can get 40% off the annual right now. And that comes with a copy of the draft guide. It comes with all the explanations, all the rankings. But we're looking at last year. We're kind of going through, seeing how things progress. Moving like we put Trey McBride. This Trey McBride hadn't even started a game yet, but he had already been on our radar on the Yang side at the bottom. We started moving him up as he played more. The moment that Zach Ertz got hurt, we moved him up right behind Pitts and Kincaid upside wise before we even really saw what it looked like. So he was rocking and rolling. We were in on Kincaid. We were in on McBride. These guys ended up being tight end ones, right? We hold up. The thing is, and I will admit a mistake here is holding on to Kyle Pitts for a little too long. It's like at a certain point, you got to let those guys go, even if he has a crazy upside. Even if you look at his rookie season with 60 catches, he had over 1,000 yards versus Jake Ferguson with 70 catches, having 760 yards. We had to let that go once we realized that Arthur Smith and Desmond Ritter weren't cutting it, and we held on just a little too long. But if we fast forward again, so we were sitting around week 17 or so. Let's fast forward to right when Mark Andrews got hurt, right? So and again, Mark Andrews got hurt, so did Dallas Goedert. So the standalone tier is looking pretty thin. These are guys again where we say, okay, if I have this guy and he's had his bye week, I'm not rostering 2 players. I'm just trusting these guys the rest of the year. And these are the guys we felt comfortable with at that stage around week 12 or so. Again, we just lost Mark Andrews. We just lost Dallas Goedert. Darren Waller was already pretty much done. So there weren't a lot of those guys out there where you say, okay, I have my guy set and I don't need to try and find upside anymore. I'm just going to play this guy. Right. So this is what the yin and yang section looked like at that stage. And again, Isaiah Likely coming off a game where he had 0 catches on 2 targets, what we did is we went back and watched the entire game and just watched how that game unfolded. And he was getting targeted, right, on plays that didn't register as targets because there was holding, there was pass interference, there were certain situations. He actually got like 6 looks, but only 2 counted as targets because it was kind of a fluky, weird situation. So we were still in on Likely. And from this point on, from this spot on, Likely was a top 5 tight end in fantasy football. So that's where we were. And if you'll notice, by the time we did get to week 12, Kyle Pitts went from being one of our top options all the way to the bottom. We just said enough is enough with the Kyle Pitts. We can't do it. You can drop him at this stage. Drop him for Isaiah Likely. Drop him for Dalton Schultz, Trey McBride, Dalton Kincaid. And if you look at the left, Dallas Goedert in orange was an injury stash that you could put on the IR. He's gotten hurt 5 years in a row now. So for me, once again, this year, I'll give you one from and again, I'll try to give you some tidbits from this year as we go through. You got to buy the draft guide and get in there and get the yin and yang rankings to have everything, all the write-ups, all the explanations. But Dallas Goedert to me is a yin tight end. But I'm still, if I'm drafting Dallas Goedert, I'm drafting another tight end on my bench to look for upside. And there's a lot of upside available once again this year. Dallas Goedert, man, he gets hurt every single year. So I really only want to count on starting him for like 3, 4, 5 games at most. And he's also the 3rd target on the team behind Devonta Smith and AJ Brown. That's universally been the case. Now he does have upside if one of them gets hurt, but I'm not really in the business of drafting one tight end who's a tight end handcuff and just hoping one of his teammates gets hurt and that he doesn't get hurt. I mean, if you want to talk about injuries, he's the guy that always gets hurt, right? So it's kind of tough to base your strategy on that. But I will draft Dallas Goedert this year at tight end 11 or 12 if I get a good value. But I'm circling back for upside. So this is where we were. And again, at this stage in the season, it gets pretty barren. You'll notice I don't even like Taysom Hill, but we're kind of out of upside options, right? Logan Thomas is on the list, and people are like, Logan Thomas, what the heck? But people forget that Logan Thomas last year, if you go back and look, had 4 games with 8 or more targets, including a game with 11 targets. So there was some Logan Thomas hype and some Logan Thomas thought process going on there. And some people also are probably looking at these rankings and say, how do you have Dalton Kincaid ahead of Trey McBride? Well, at this stage, we're talking about mid-November. Zach Ertz was still set to come back. Zach Ertz had not yet announced that he wanted to be released by the Cardinals. That was November 30th. It was either very late November or very early December. So we still were in a situation where I can't quite put Trey McBride ahead of Dalton Kincaid. I can't put him in the standalone tier because we don't know if this guy's coming back or not. And if he did, in the first game he came back and things were split, now we got to go back and tell people, hey, I know we told you that you could start Trey McBride the rest of the season. Turns out that that's not even true. And now we got to move them back down. It's always like we're trying to be safe with it. We're trying to have 2 tight ends and if possible, hold them through the playoffs and use them. Now, ideally with this strategy, you won't have 2 tight ends. That's one of the biggest misconceptions on this strategy. I'm going full screen on this. One of the biggest misconceptions is that the yin and yang tight end is some sort of pairing system where the goal is to have 2 tight ends all year long. And that's what turns people off a lot of times because they don't understand the strategy. They think that what we're doing is streaming tight ends. They think that we're drafting 2 tight ends and we're going to play one this week and one next week, and then we're going to keep doing that. No, we don't want to do that. That's not ideally the situation. The ideal outcome, the number one ideal outcome, which we got last year when people go in yin and yang tight end with Evan Ingram and Sam Laporta, or Evan Ingram and Dalton Kincaid, because he did finish as a tight end 1, is that you draft 2 and you can trade 1, that you can trade 1 away. And then now you have 1 tight end that we trust, and you also recoup some of that value. That's the ideal situation. The next situation is that you go yin and yang tight end, and you use the yin tight end for the first few weeks. So you start Zach Ertz for 3, 4, 5 weeks, and then you find the breakout tight end, and then you could just drop the other guy, right? Ideally we don't want to have 2 tight ends on our roster the entire year, right? That, like for instance, with the David Njoku example, you go out, you draft a safe tight end to start for you, and you hit on David Njoku, and he's kind of safe, and you move him over. You drop the other tight end. You can still roster another upside tight end if you want, but you're actually probably okay with Evan. Obviously you're okay with Evan Ingram. He had the second most targets of any tight end of all time. But David Njoku, you could probably all right with him. Jake Ferguson, right? So that's the idea: is you don't want to have tough decisions every week. We're trying to find the breakout tight end. We're trying to find Sam Laporta, Trey McBride, Isaiah Likely down the stretch. We're trying to find, Darren Waller, his big breakout year. Even Dalton Schultz, his year where he was like tight end 35 in ADP and finished like tight end 3. That's the goal. The goal isn't to have tough decisions or 2 tight ends. It is tougher in the early going, but we find these guys, right? And then so that's where we were at that stage, is that you have Isaiah Likely moving up, and these are Trey McBride, Isaiah Likely, Dalton Schultz, Dalton Kincaid. Those are the guys you want. And then I'll just fast forward to fantasy playoffs. Again, you have your standalone guys. Not much has changed because Mark Andrews is gone, Dallas Goedert's gone. Kelsey Hawkinson, Laporta, Evan Ingram, George Kittle, and then you have Trey McBride moving up to the top of the yin and yang tight end. Dalton Kincaid, Isaiah Likely still there, but Dalton Schultz, he's moving down. And I have to warn some people this year with guys like Cole Kmet and Dalton Schultz. You see them on this chart. You're not going to see them on this year's chart because I'm not interested in drafting those 2 players. We want guys that are either incredibly safe, as in locked in. If they're going to be in the yin column, I need them to at least be a top 3 target on the team. That's what I need. And when I look at the Bears, right, they got a rookie quarterback. They have Keenan Allen, DJ Moore. They went out, they drafted Rome Odunze at pick 9 overall, and their offensive coordinator rotates everybody like crazy at tight end. And they brought in Gerald Everett, which is not a good spot. And same with Dalton Schultz. It's like, how many injuries does Dalton Schultz need to be a top 2 target on his team, or even a top 3 target? If Tank Dell gets hurt again, he's still third behind Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs. And last year, Dalton Schultz, in the games when either Nico Collins or Tank Dell were out, he was getting 7 targets a game. 7. In the games where those guys were healthy, he was only getting 4 targets a game. 4. Yeah, 4. You can't start that guy, right? And then now they add another wide receiver in there. You got to be outside of your mind drafting this player. You got to be outside of your mind drafting Dalton Schultz or Cole Kmet. And there's another one that people are starting to get a little excited about is Noah Fant, right? Because they're saying, oh, Will Disley's gone, Colby Parkinson's gone. Now he can be the every down player. I tweeted this out a little while back. I said there's a big difference between being the tight end, there's a big difference between being better this year than last year and being usable in fantasy football, right? And that's Noah Fant. Like, I think he will be better than he was last year, but are we going to be able to rely on that guy? He's at best the fourth best pass catcher on that team, unless you think he's better pass catcher than Jackson Smith and Jigba or Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf. It's just not realistic. He needs 2 injuries to get into that range. If one of those guys gets hurt, we'll move him up to the yin side, but he's never going to be on the yang side. He's never going to be a standalone guy or an upside guy without that upside. Last year, this isn't true for every year, but last year, every tight end won. Every top 12 tight end in fantasy football was a top 2 target on their team, right? We've been preaching this for years. It's worked for us for years. It's helped us avoid the guys that are super inconsistent week to week, like Robert Tunyon, right? Who finished as a top 5 tight end, but he had 1 catch in championship week and completely let you down, right? That's what we're doing here. This strategy is available now. The full write up is up there. We have one free article, What Makes an Elite Tight End, that I'm going to tweet out and post on Reddit and stuff early next week. That's a free article. It breaks down all the stuff we look for. Doesn't really get into this year. It's just kind of an evergreen article on what we look for. Then the other 3 articles, the meat and potatoes of this strategy, the elite are the elite tight ends for 2024. Those are the guys that if we're drafting them, we're not drafting 2 tight ends. I'm not saying always draft 2. If you get Travis Kelce, you don't need to draft another tight end. You just have to worry about his bye week, right? That's the first article. It lays out which guys we feel comfortable drafting as just a standalone guy, right? The next article is the fades, which again, some of these fade guys you could use as part of Yin and Yang, and we make sure that's clear. With a guy like Dallas Goedert, we say, hey, you know what? If you get a good price, go Yin and Yang. But we're highlighting guys that are just going a little too early for our comfort that we're not taking at ADP. If we get later than ADP as part of Yin and Yang, we'll do it. But I'm not some of these guys I'm not drafting, and you might be shocked at a couple of names in there. And then the last one is the big one, the most important one. That's Yin and Yang. And that's where we bring it all together. I mentioned the standalone guys. I mentioned which of the fades that we might use in Yin and Yang. And it's got all the upside picks for this year. All the players that I think are going to be this year's league winning tight ends. That's in the draft guide now. So you can pick up just a copy of the draft guide if you want. I mean, and I know not everybody is loaded with money and all, so here's the way we're doing it. You can buy a copy of just the cheat sheet if you want that has the rankings, right? It has all my dynamic tiers, it has all my rankings for every position, it has all Howard Bender's rankings, it has Yin and Yang tight end rankings. You can buy just that if you want, right? Fantasyalarm.com, go to cheat sheet, you can get that. And that's reasonably affordable. Then there's the draft. I mean, all this stuff is affordable when you consider that, there's none of the products are even more than $30. And your buy-ins for these leagues are 25, 50, 100. If you play on FFPC, where I like to play, the high stakes gamers play FFPC, then the buy-ins can be $10,000, right? So a $30 guide that includes everything you need in fantasy football, including the strategy, that's not too bad. So you can get the draft guide now, just a copy of the draft guide, or you can get the All Pro membership, and that gets you everything. That gets you into our Discord. That gets you set up with, yeah, Jeremy, I'm telling you, Cole Kmet going at 100 in ADP, crazy. That gets you set up with everything, gets you in our Discord, it gets you in these drafts we do on Wednesday, it gets you the draft guide, it gets you the cheat sheet, it gets you all the DFS, it gets you all the sports, baseball, basketball, hockey, MMA, golf, you name it. So that's what we got going on right now. Definitely check that out. And before I get out of here, I did want to mention, because I brought it up briefly, my FFPC, that's the place to play if you're going to play high stakes, right? And over there, it's tight end premium. So you can get so much leverage over there. The guys that won these big leagues, you better believe that having Sam Laporta or Trey McBride or Isaiah Likely, having those guys on your roster in a tight end premium format, that's how you dominate. That's how you crush, right? The Fantasy Pros tournament is up right now, as Mile High Luke pointed out. He's already got 2 teams in that. The FFPC main event is already up there. And again, you don't have to play for $1,000 or $5,000. They got tournaments starting at $25, $35. And if you use promo code COOP at myffpc.com right now, then you can actually get $25 for free when you deposit 35 or more. $25 in bonus credits. I suggest if you're going to do that and you want to play a couple, most of their tournaments are $35 as buy-ins. So if you deposit 45, use promo code COOP, you can buy into 2 tournaments and you'll be in 2 tournaments just like Mile High Luke. But yeah, that's where the big dogs play. That's where the big money is honestly made. So go to myffpc.com, use promo code COOP. Today, just a quick half-hour show. Didn't want to. I got to do the show once again. How filling in for Jim Bowden on Sirius XM tonight from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern time. So I didn't want to use up all my voice. We did it again last night. So catch me over there 6 to 8 p.m. tonight, and that's it. That's the Yin and Yang tight end strategy. And here's the thing. Here's my promise to you. I can't promise that you're going to win your league. I can't promise that you're going to get every breakout tight end, even that you're going to beat other people, that you're going to be able to hit it. I can't even promise that I will identify the tight end. We've been incredibly fortunate over the last 7 years or so to have done really well at finding them, but I can't promise that. What I can promise you is that every step of the way, I'll be doing everything in my power, looking at all the advanced metrics, watching the games, watching the tape, listening to what people are saying, seeing who's hurt, who's not, and moving these guys around, as I just showed you during the show, every step of the way, giving us the best chance possible to succeed. And I'll be showing you the exact moves that I'm doing in my leagues, and I do pretty well at this. So that I can promise you. I can promise you that we're going to do the best we can. I can't promise you that you're going to get this year's Sam Laporta or whatever, but we're going to do our best to find them. And a lot of times when we use Yin and Yang tight end, we're actually drafting them. Where everybody else is trying to hit them off waivers, we've already got them. So I can promise you that, baby. Football is almost here. If you don't, and again, like I said, no pressure. I know people want to support us, right? People want to support me, Howard, John, and Pemba, everybody. They want to support my baby, Lainey, right? She needs, so she's not wearing newspapers on her shoes to school. I get that. And if you don't, but again, there's no pressure to buy a draft guide, no pressure to become a member. We would love to have you on the Discord and hanging out with us and all that stuff. But you can support us with a like, a subscribe, a comment in the chat, right? See, I love people in the chat saying hit that like button. I appreciate you guys. That goes a long way. It helps us out. A follow on Twitter, a retweet, that goes a long way to helping us out, and we'll do our best to help you guys out. So thank you so much for joining me today. We will be back again. We'll be on the show tonight, 6 to 8 p.m. On Sirius XM channel 87. Then we'll be back on the YouTube channel on Wednesday, and I'll be back again next Friday. And we're going to start getting things ramped up a little bit on the YouTube channel. It's time to get things going. More shorts, more quick shows, maybe 2, 3, 5 minute shows rather than half hour or 1 hour. But today we had to hit on the Yin and Yang tight end. Incredibly important to me, incredibly important to us. Thank you guys for tuning in today. Love you over at the Fantasy Life.